All right, everybody, welcome to the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series. This is part two with Senior Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, it's good to see you. Say hello to everyone.
I have. I've been trying.
Well, good. Anyway, we're going to move right on. So last time we were talking to you, we were talking about the roots of Kempo Karate. Let's pick it up from there. 1959 is when you started. Why don't you just do a recap on that and take us up to about 1962?
Well, the recap would take an hour because that's what it took last time to do the, from 1959.
We're talking Cliff Notes.
Yeah, well, I started in 59 and things progressed along. It took me 3 years and 2 months to get my brown belt. And then in 1962, I got my brown belt in April of 62. And then some really interesting occurrences happened. Real interesting, because in 62, I got my brown belt in April, and then in September, I got my black belt. Now you'd say to yourself, that's awfully quick, and it is. And why did that happen? Well, it happened because that's when during that period of time, sometime between April and September, I'd say right about in the middle, is when Jimmy Woo split off with Ed Parker's advanced class. Now, you probably heard the story or know the story. So that's what happened then. Well, as it turned out, I was the only one out of that class that stayed, and it wasn't a calculated thing on my part. It was just something that I wanted to do, and those guys invited me to go along, and I said, no, thank you. I'm very happy where I am, and I couldn't understand why they did what they did, but that's another story. We've already covered it. So at that point, I had Ed Parker's ear. I mean, he would listen to anything I said because I was the only one talking to him. Really, I mean, all the guys that he trusted and were going to be the backbone of his organization all left. So that left me in the greatest position I could ever have been. I didn't calculate it that way. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. And there I was. So one of the first things I did, I told Ed Parker, I said, you've written 2 really, really good books. Well, he was actually in the process of writing his second book at the time, The Secrets of Chinese Karate. Well, but he had already written Kempo Karate. And I said, the problem with a book, of course, is that you can't see the person move. And until you see Kempo move, you ain't seen nothing, as Al Joseph used to say. You ain't seen nothing yet, because it's the movement that is so dynamic and so impressive that's what they were missing in the book. And any book, anybody, you can't duplicate or replicate action. So I said, we need to put out some film. Well, at the time, the only film that was feasible was 8mm. Well, you can't shoot something in 8mm. I found that out in research. And you have to shoot it in 16. Then you take it to a lab, they produce it in 16, split the film, and when they reproduce it on 8, you get actually 1/4 of the size, because a 16mm frame is that size. Then they split it in half, then they split it down to 2 per frame. So you're actually getting 1/4 of the 16mm. But you shot it in 16mm film, and that's what gives you the quality. Well, it just so happened that Ed Parker had a 16mm camera with the turret. Remember the old turret lenses? He had a close-up, a medium close-up, and a long shot. And kind of a funny story, because he had absolutely no use for it. Ed Parker wasn't a photographer. He didn't want to mess around with films, but somebody swapped it for lessons. In fact, Leilani told my wife, she says, we have a basement full of stuff that people have swapped for lessons with Ed Parker. And some of it came in handy, like the 16mm Bell and Howell. So we used that. And well, actually what happened was I came to him and I said, we got to do the films. And he was kind of receptive. And I told him, I said, look, we're going to try and teach some stuff on film. Well, it's very difficult. Now, you've probably all seen those films. They're all over the internet. I mean, you can look at them anytime. Just punch up Ed Parker 1950s, 60s films, and they'll come all black and white. We're in white keys. And so I said, we got to make these. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll put up the money for all the research and the stuff that have to do with the lab, and I'll buy the film, the raw footage, the stock film, and I'll do all that. And I said, I'll do the advertising. I'll create the advertising. I'll find the advertisers to go with, and so on. And you know, we'll do this thing. And I said, and you, of course, will be who you are, and I will be your dummy. We didn't have the word "uki" in the lexicon in those days. And I'll be the dummy. So I said, here's the deal. Because you are who you are, and I am who I am, we'll go 60-40. 60 to you, 40 to me. And he says, let me get back with you. So the next week, we came back and we were working on, I think I told you before that, you know, we would work on Ed and I after the class. So I got to ask him any kind of a question I wanted about Kempo or anything for that matter. And he was just so forthcoming with me anyway, that, God, I picked up stuff that nobody else was privy to in those days for about 2 or 3 years. Really, it was that way. So we got back together the next week, and I said, have you thought about making those 8mm films? He says, I have. But he says, that 60-40 deal, no good. And I thought, okay, I overstepped my bounds. 70-30, 75-25, 80, what do you want? He says, no, Chuck, it's got to be 50-50 or I don't want to do it. And I said, Ed Parker, nobody negotiates themselves down. Negotiation is supposed to bring you up, not down. But I tell you, the man he had an insight. He really did. And he knew that eventually for this thing to really work, we were going to have to be partners on it, equal partners. Go ahead.
I got a question for you. Let's go back when the original group of students that were there training with you and in the group with you and Mr. Parker, who were they? And at what point those that left who were they? Does that make sense? I'm trying to, who was the total number of people versus, and then later on left and they separated and they went on with Jimmy Woo.
Right. All right. Well, the advanced class, which was brown and black belts, it came down to that. There was actually just before Al Tracy and I got our brown belts the same night. He wouldn't remember that, but he's passed away now. Anyway, I remember it because there was only one other person. I remember who it was Al. Anyway, we got our brown belts. Well, they took off and split for San Francisco right shortly after he got his brown belt. In fact, I think he kind of waited to get it until they went. And when they went up to San Francisco, of course, they were both brown belts, Jim and Al. All right, so in the beginning, I mean, in the advanced class, in those beginning days, Rich Montgomery, Jimmy Brown, and Rick Flores were the 3 black belts in that order. They made black belt in that order. Now there were other brown belts at the time. Eddie Tobias was a brown belt. Leonard Myers was a brown belt. Chuck Pranke was a brown belt. I don't think that Sterling Peacock was yet a brown belt. I made it. Al made it, and then we that was the advanced class. And there were some other guys that either went with Jimmy or they dropped.
Okay, the guys that went with Jimmy, who were they?
Well, those were the ones I mentioned.
Oh, the guys I just mentioned. I see.
They all went. The only one that stayed was me.
I know that there was a few people that were down there. When did Dave Hebler come in? When did Joe Dimmick come in?
No, Joe Dimmick was there with me, but I don't recall Joe getting his brown belt with Ed Parker. Joe was kind of in and out. What happened was he was with Ed Parker. I think he actually started before me. Was with Ed Parker when we were in Southgate. Then when the school closed, he came up. We may even have driven up together a time or so. I think he mentioned that. And then we drove up there together, but not for long, because then Joe dropped out and I didn't see him again. So I don't know what happened to him. He didn't get his brown with Ed.
The reason I bring that up is that on May, a week from Sunday, we will have Joe Dimmick as our special guest, and he'll be a part of it. And then also, by the way, tomorrow we'll have Dennis Knatzer. We'll be talking, and I'm really glad that he's doing better. His health has improved, so he'll be talking tomorrow. And then down the line, we'll be having the Redarties, as well as Marty Zanovich, Huck Planis, let's see, and a few other people I've spoken to. I'm looking forward to seeing Cecil Peoples. He'll be there. I can see him watching. We're going to have him. I also want to talk with Gary. So we're going to bring in the sister systems too, because I like to have their input of how it was when they were, going through their martial arts journey. Also, while we're on it, I want to send a shout out to two of my favorite people, Gil Hibben and Linda Hibben. How y'all doing? We have today, I don't have it because it's in the house, but I have my Rambo 3, so no messing around, guys. I've got this with me today. I actually have a Hibben knife, a couple of Hibben knives, a Parker knife. I have a Presley knife. Go figure that one out. And let's see what else. And then obviously Wes and Derek are out there. I know they're watching as well. I'm very excited. So there's a lot of going on. This is like a family reunion, and it's the chance to ask these questions. So you brought up who was there in that reformation. I guess that was the second phase of the Ed Parker journey of Kempo, correct?
It really was. Yeah, that was a big point where things started. In fact, one of the things I heard, we may have talked about this last week, I'm not sure, but one of the things that Ed Parker heard was that one of the reasons that Jimmy Woo was able to lure these guys to him was that he promoted the idea with them that Ed Parker had taught them everything he knew, which was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But they bought into it, and he was going to teach them the real thing. In fact, talking about the real thing, let's talk just for a minute about the secrets. You know the story, Paul.
Yeah, I know this story.
No. These are the real secrets.
You mean the one when I experienced in 1982 in Pasadena, and I shared with you?
Well, I experienced it a whole lot earlier than you did.
I know. That's what was so humorous about it.
Yeah, well, it was so funny because
tell us about the secrets of Kempo karate.
I guess he did this periodically because it's too good to only do it with one group, but he did it with us. One night, we're working out in Paris and doing techniques and so on. And I noticed him go to the back, and I thought I saw him lock the door, which is kind of strange. And then I saw him walk to the front, and I thought I saw him lock the door. And I'm saying, wow, this is weird. So then he comes to the match and says, all right, settle down. So we all turn around and say, I'm watching, waiting. And he says, I hear what you guys are talking about. You don't know I hear, but I hear. And he says, you want to know when I'm going to teach you the secrets. And I had heard guys talk about the secrets. When is he going to teach us the secrets? And I thought to myself, there ain't no secrets. This is bullshit. There's no secrets at all. But now here he is saying, tonight, I'm going to teach you the secret. And I thought, I'll be damned. There are secrets. Wow, this is great. I didn't think it was easy. And then he had us doing basics. I mean, we did basics until our arms and legs almost fell off. We're each of us sloshing around in a pool of our own sweat. Our gis are clinging to us. We can hardly breathe. And he says, you wanted the secrets? There, you got them now.
That's funny, because when the Mr. Sullivan's laughing is that I told him this, unbeknownst to this story. I didn't ever heard it before. And I was telling him the time I was teaching in Pasadena, and Mr. Parker walked in, and he would always go into his office, check his mail, et cetera, and he'd look out and watch. Well, he was watching. I was teaching an advanced class of green belts and brown belts, I believe, at the time. And same scenario. Walked out, but he was wearing his Hawaiian shirt, his brown khaki, and he took off his flip-flops. Go figure, right? And he says, Mr. Casey, I would like to take your class over. And I said, yes, sir. And everybody lined up. And then he went to say the same damn thing that he said to you 20 years earlier. Yep. And again, wore the living hell out of everybody and concluded with the same thing. So I think that was the essence of it. And he always promoted that. He was very, very strong on the basics. And I think we need to revisit that, especially as our journey has been this way, that, that we need to look and remember what is the essential thing of what we were taught. Not all the flash, but the foundation that you need to know your stances, your footwork. Without that, you really don't have much more to go with.
I'll tell you something about Ed Parker that you probably wouldn't know, Paul, but had Ed Parker had the writers, I think he would love to have been a stand-up comic. He loved to make people laugh. He would inject as much humor as he possibly could into his demonstrations and seminars. I'm sure that you notice it. I mean, whenever he could put in a zinger, a quip of some kind, he would do it, and he just loved to tell jokes. I understand when he was in Ireland one time, this kid walked up to him and he says, "Hey Eddie, I think I heard you like jokes," and everybody went, "Hey Eddie, what the hell's the matter with him?" So he told the joke, and Ed laughed. He said, Bill, I got one for you. And he said for the next hour or so, these two guys were swapping jokes.
Yeah.
And but when he walked up and said, "Hey, Eddie," everybody I mean, all the higher ups in the school just went, "Oh my God, this guy is dead, man. He's just dead." Anyway,
I know
that was it. No,
I know a lot of the guys that are watching this had their personal relationships in them one way or the other. I was sort of fortunate being in Pasadena. I got to see, Mr. Parker in a different light, come in business-wise and oversee. But, his sense of humor was wonderful. And he would always inject something like that to break the ice when he would teach a seminar. And I was at numerous seminars with him, with Frank, and you gained a lot. One of my favorite stories is one of my fellow black belts that we tested together was Steve Orsino. And Steve would, he could always tell you in the back, right? Am I right, Steven? And, he would do this to break it up, because I think you go to a seminar and you'd be listening to him and he would inject whatever he was going to talk about. But it was very difficult for him to get responses out of the black belts, because these big, tough, strong martial artists were intimidated by the presence of the founding Grand Master. And Mr. Parker had a very warm personality. He could basically calm you down. He would like you to call him Ed, though I never called him Ed ever in my life. It was always Mr. Parker. But he'd ask, and I think the reason is that some of them were fearful that they would either not know the material or the answer, or they may say the wrong answer, or they think they may embarrass him. And there's a really great story, and I think, Chuck, you can tell that one about the little boy in the classroom Mr. Parker's talking about. Raise your hand, and you know what I'm talking about. I'm leaving. Yeah, tell him the joke, because this is classic Ed Parker.
It was a favorite of Ed Parker's. He says the teacher looked out in the classroom, and she said, "Does anybody here think they're stupid?" And nobody raised their hands. Nobody. And she says, "Is there anyone in the room that thinks they're stupid?" She had her hand up. And she looked around and she waited for her. And one little boy raised his hand. And she says, "Johnny, you think you're stupid?" He says, "No, teacher, I just didn't want you to be the only one with your hand raised." Is that the one you're talking about?
That's a classic Parker. Yeah. So while we're on this subject and we're talking about things, do you think Mr. Parker, with technology now, do you think he would be using more of this platform that we are using now, Zoom?
Oh, I think he'd be on this all the time. I mean, oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He was a little slow getting into video. I don't know why, really. I guess because he didn't ask the right people.
Okay, so let's move on to some questions. So it's now 1962. You're a black belt. How many black belts did Mr. Parker have at that time?
One, me.
Just you?
Well, after everybody split.
Okay, what about Dave Hebler? Wasn't he there with you?
No, he was behind me. He was in the intermediate class when the advanced class split. And then the intermediate class became the advanced class.
I see.
Because everybody just jumped up, a notch. And that's why I got my black belt in 5 months instead of a year or a year and a half.
Ah, okay.
Because he needed more rank.
I see.
And I knew it was I'll tell you the story about what happened. I told him I think it should take 4 years, because I wanted it to be like the next February. And he says, "No, a lot of people do it in less time than that, Chuck." So I knew what he was going to do, and he did. He promoted me in. It was kind of strange, because I really wanted it to take 4 years.
I see. Well, I know that he wasn't really preoccupied with rank. That was something that was probably just thrust on him to do that. Am I right?
Well, when we started, when the black belts were black belts, Paul, first of all, back in the day when it was only white, brown, and black, everybody knew who was who in the zoo, because there were so few brown belts, and there was only the one black belt until finally there were 4, with the 3 guys that he promoted and him. I think had Ed Parker lived a lot longer, like say till now even, I think he could have held the line on 10th degree. I don't think anyone would have dared to take 10th degree while he was still alive. I really don't.
Is that a bad thing, though?
No, well, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, once he was gone, it was like, well, he didn't leave a line of succession. He didn't appoint anybody, to fill his shoes.
Was that by choice?
No, he didn't know he was going to die. Oh, he didn't have any idea, you know, and he was a young man, for God's sakes. He was 59 years old. I mean, I survived 30 more years than that. We were, you know, basically the same age. So he didn't think he was going to go then. And had he known, I think he would have probably done something about it. But I think had he held that position, I think that everybody I don't think anybody would have dared. I would hate to have been the first guy to down a 10th degree if Ed Parker was still alive.
I see. Who was? Was there some? I don't even know who that would be.
Nobody. All right. Like I said, when we started, it was white, brown, and black. So everybody knew who was who. Now, it wasn't until much later that all of a sudden Ed Parker showed up with a 3rd degree. And I said, where'd that come from? He said, oh, he went to Hawaii and talked to old man Shao, and he promoted a 3rd degree. I said, there's degrees? And he said, oh, yeah, there's degrees. I said, really? How many? 7. Said, really? 7 degrees. And then a few months later, it was 10. And I thought, oh, my God, it's going to be like the what do they call it? Masons. It's going to be a 32nd degree or something. Oh, my Jesus. Give me a break.
Where's the funny hats? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, with the funny hats, right?
Okay.
Well, we get the funny belts, they get the funny hats.
Okay, so here's a couple of questions for you that relate to it. Okay, so you had these people coming in, training. When did Danny Inosanto come into the system?
Danny was with the group with Dave. He was in that class behind it. As a matter of fact, when it first came up, because of Ed's schedule of that, I taught that class for a while. And I remember one time when Dave was with Elvis, and he got promoted to a higher rank than I was, a higher degree. And we got in the class, and here's Dave wearing his 3rd degree or whatever, and I'm wearing the 2nd. And so I stood to his left. And he looked at me, he said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, you're 3rd degree, I'm 2nd. He grabbed me, he sticks me over, he says, you're my instructor. He says, get the hell over there.
Wow.
he wouldn't let me.
So take us through a class that you were teaching with Danny Inosanto, Dave Hebler, and walk us through it, you know, in a concise.
It was still the same as before. Like I said before, we did. I don't like calisthenics. I hate calisthenics, and I hate the idea that we warm up with calisthenics, because to me, if I'm paying for a 1-hour class of Kempo, I want 60 minutes of Kempo. I don't want 15 minutes of calisthenics. Anybody can count those. Anybody can do them. You want to warm up? I'll give you a warm up. Do your stances, do your maneuvers, do your blocks, do your punches, do your kicks. You'll get so warmed up you're ready to drop dead. And it's all Kempo. You don't need calisthenics to warm up. And even as an advanced class, when you say left neutral move, you go down that line, somebody's going to have their foot, instead of toe heel, they're going to be a little over or a little less. And you can correct it because they got a little sloppy. And you can correct even advanced class. When they're doing everyone blocks, all of a sudden you notice they're not releasing from the elbow. They're just doing this instead of whack. You'll see that. And you can make corrections on that. You can make people better with their basic single moves. So that's what we did. We warmed up with basics, and then we went into a technique or two, and we ran a line or two, and then we fought.
Run us through the techniques, because I think you alluded there was only like about 10, 12 techniques that you guys
Oh, there was more than that. We had all the basic. We had all the grabs and holds. So you had a headlock, a bear hug, front bear hug, shoulder grab. You had all those. So there was probably about 15 of those. And then we had another dozen or so technique. Oh, we had more than that. It probably came up to 20 or 30. But then, you see, once that split happened, and Ed heard that he had taught him everything, he started creating a technique a week. Well, in 2 years, you got another 100 techniques.
So now we're talking about techniques. What about forms? How were the forms created? Who were the authors of the forms?
The forms are just the techniques in a string.
Okay, but who created those?
Ed Parker.
Okay. Who else contributed?
He created the techniques, and a lot of it was when he was doing this.
He was driving the car?
Yeah.
Okay.
He'd been thinking about it, and he'd get out of the car.
That's close. Robert, how could that? Now we know why the hands were really tight, right, buddy? I mean, just, I just want to make sure we're in our box, okay? I remember teaching the box.
Then he'd get out of his car and he'd say to somebody, throw it right. And he'd do it. Say, okay, that works. Then he'd teach it,
Uh-huh.
But he'd think it out first and get it in his head and move that way.
When you were learning, they had 3 forms, correct?
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
1 and 2 and 3. Were they just called 1, 2, and 3?
It was no longer short, so it's just 1, 2, and 3.
I see.
Form 1, Form 2, and Form 3.
Do you know who created Form 4?
Ed Parker.
Okay, so he did all that. Okay.
Who else?
Oh, no, I
Now,
just...
Edward, for a while there, he had everybody writing a thesis. And they would turn it into him with the idea that he could use any part of that he wanted without royalties or without asking. That was the deal. I never had to write one. That was after my time. I was already a black belt. We already had the school. And I wasn't privy to that. But that happened a lot. I know guys that turned it in, and he put it into the Sullivans. So different people through their writings actually did contribute to the system.
Okay,
but I don't know who did what.
So let's move on a little bit. So we're out of 62. We're getting into 63. The book comes out. The next book, The Secrets of Chinese Karate.
Yeah, which you'll know Jimmy Wu's name is not on there at all, and it has nothing to do with Jimmy's system to begin with. Jimmy's system was all circular. Okay. Same thing with the kicks, press, and kicks. And that was it. I have two techniques that I've taken from the training I took with Jimmy that I put into our system because they're good. But two techniques do not make a system.
By the way, while I've got this moment and I'm holding books, obviously the first book, I'm very excited to announce that I talked to Dr. Carl Totten. Hello, Carl. We see you there. How you doing, buddy? I know he's there. I can see he just got done. He was in another meeting. We're going to do the Kempo Book Club, where we'll look at certain martial arts books. We're going to pretty much start with Kempo because obviously this is a Kempo forum. And we'll take these books and we'll do some comparisons. And I'm really glad that we're going to go on this trip with Carl Totten hosting that. And we'll be discussing it more details. And I know that he wants to explore this because it's, just one of his great strengths. He can just offer so much because of the versatility. Anyway, that's just something that's going to come up, and we'll probably talk about that probably more tomorrow when we're with Dennis Knatzer. So we're getting past that. We're getting to the end of 63. Now there's a thing called the International Karate Championships. How did that idea begin?
He called me up one day, and it was on Monday, which is one of my Sunday, Monday off. And he says, "Are you busy for a little while?" I said, "No." So he shows up at the house with Dave Hebel. And while he was saying hi to Flo or whatever, my wife, Dave says to me, he says, "What's going on?" And I said, "I was going to ask you." I have no idea. He said, "Well, we're going to go someplace." I said, "Well, okay. Whatever it is, I'm sure, it's going to be good." So we got a car and we got on the Long Beach Freeway. We went down to the end of the Long Beach Freeway into Long Beach. And he all of a sudden drove around, he parked, and we went into this big building, which was the Municipal Auditorium at the time. And we walked out into the middle of this thing. We just walked right in. Didn't ask anybody or anything. Nobody stopped us. And we're standing in this huge auditorium. And he says, "This is it." And Dave and I looked at each other. And we said, "Great. This is what?" He says, "This is where we're going to hold the first International Karate Championships." And, we've talked about this, I think, a little bit, Paul. That name that he chose was absolutely the most brilliant name that he could possibly have come up with for his tournament. Because, first of all, it was not international. There was nothing international about it. There might have been 2 guys from Mexico, 3 from Canada, and 1 from England or Ireland, maybe. And maybe Hawaii, but Hawaii was by that time part of the States. So nothing international about it. It was a local tournament is really all it was. The other thing was about when he said championships. Well, championships would be like the Olympics. You get your states, they send them to a regional, they send them to a final. These are all champions. Send the champions to a regional, then the champions of that go to the finals. The champions of that go represent the country. There's nothing championships about that. It was just a tournament. But what a name. What a brilliant name. Even at the time, I thought to myself, you're not lying to anybody, but at the same time, there's nothing international and there's nothing championships about it. But that name has been used by other people. All right, so now we get into...
you had mentioned before about the use of film. Did he bring a lot? I know there was some filmage of the 64 championship. Do you know how many cameras? Who was involved?
Oh, God. Like 1 camera walking around. There was very, very little. Very little. In fact, I think most of the the footage that he has of the 64 internationals was 8mm from people that were there that shot it, and he got a hold of it because we didn't have a regular cameraman or anything. No.
Okay, I got to share a little story. Mr. Parker's not here, so I don't have to worry about answering to him now. Steve, we used to have in the Pasadena school, right in the entrance, there was the reception area where they had an opening, a cubicle, and there was a little, you walk in there around the corner, and there were some cupboards and whatnot. And so one day Frank said to me, would you clean up this area? And I said, yeah, sure. So I went in there, and everything was locked up. And so I said to him, I said, where's the keys to open this stuff? And he goes, I don't know. Hello, this is my son, George, who ran in, and he's run out now. And long story short, he said, I don't know. Go look and see if there's something in the drawers. You know, like, I ain't going into Dad's drawers to look to find out what's in there. I really hate to say it. I felt really bad. It's like, I don't know about this. So I went there. I found this set of keys. So I went in there, got the keys, and I just systematically went through each one to see which opened up the door. I found in there a movie projector, and I found all this film. And sure enough, it was all, remember that, Steve? I opened it up. I started putting, I figured, I hope to God this is all karate and not something else. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't videos of that stuff back then, but you know, you never know what you find. So I'm sitting there playing, and I'm watching the 1964 karate championships. I'm watching 65, 66, 67. Who do I see in there? Bruce Lee, everything else. And I go, oh my God. Then I found a bunch of other material and whatnot. And sure enough, the phone rings. Frank wasn't there, so I picked up the phone. And who is it? It's Mr. Parker. Oh, Mr. Parker, how you doing? Oh, good. Yeah, Frank's not here. Any mail? No, the mail hasn't come, but you won't believe this. Sir, Frank had me clean up the reception room. Silence. I said, and I found a bunch of film that I think you might want. I'd be right there. Click. I swear to God, that guy must have drove 100 miles an hour from his house to get. He came. He goes, where is it? I said, it's all here. I put it up, and I went, don't kill me, please. It was not my fault. I swear to God.
He probably wanted to kiss you.
And he looked. He goes, oh, very good. He picked it all up. Threw it in his, all right, tell Frank I came. Bye. And he left. But I at least got to watch it all before he called. Thank God. So I did to see. I shared it with the other guys. They're like, no, really? Yeah. I can't believe it. I swear to God, I got in more trouble than ever. And then in the middle of the room, in the workout, there was a little closet. I thought it was just like the air conditioning duct or something, unit. And I was going in there, and I cleaned it out. And sure enough, what did I find? The original manuscripts and all the documentation on the Ed Parker system, how to run a school, you name it. It was all the hand technique. You got it. And I asked Frank, what do you want me to do? He said, I don't care. What do you want to do with it? I said, do you mind if I make a copy of it? And I made copies of it. And later on, I gave copies to my brethren, Steve, Paul, John, and me. So I would not be the only one getting in trouble. So anyway, so that's it. So tell us about the internationals.
Well, the first international championships was basically a disaster. I mean, nobody knew what they were doing. There was way, way, way more people involved as had signed up for it than he had anticipated. And they were coming in last minute. I mean, they were supposed to have registered a week or so before the cutoff date, but the cutoff date was basically when they handed in the cash for the entrance fees. That was the cutoff. And then he'd say to somebody, put them in where? I mean, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And yet I understand why he had to do it, because he spent a lot of money putting on that first international championships. In fact, at that time, like I said, I could have asked him anything I wanted, and I did. After the event was over, I said, how'd you do? He said, I lost $1,800. $1,800 in 1964 was a down payment on a medium price house in California. That was a lot of money. $1,800 was well over 18,000 today. So the day went on until they were putting in the chairs for the final event. We didn't have a stage, we didn't have a riser. We just had a big open spot in the middle of the floor. They taped it off for the ring, and that was going to be where everything happened. They had the ringside seats, and then they had prizes, and then they had the balconies. Well, in the meantime, they're putting in the seats, the risers, that go under the balcony, up to the balcony. And at that point, they were still running matches. So every time they put in seats, they had to move the matches. And they finally ran out of room on the floor, so they were running them under the balcony. Now here you had very poor lighting, very poor air, very poor conditions all the way around. And you're having the finals. These are the guys that are going to fight in the finals, fighting for the semifinals under the balcony. Well, somehow they got finished. While people were streaming into their seats. Well, somebody had forgotten the number or mark the seats as far as rows and aisles and seats. So nobody knew where their seats were, even though they paid for down front seats. People just filled them in, and they go look and say, "I think you have my seat." I say, "Really?" Too late now, pal. And it looked like it was going to be, I'm dead serious when I say it looked like it was going to turn into a riot.
Really?
Because everybody was pissed off about not getting their seats. And they were winding up in the balcony when they paid for ringside. It was really, really bad. I mean, it was getting real serious. And it was going on. The finals were supposed to start at like 6 p.m. Well, at 8 p.m., they hadn't started yet. Nothing had started yet. So there were people sitting in their seats for 2 hours with nothing going on except arguments about seating. So finally, the announcer was a good friend of mine, one of my students. He said, "Chuck, if the chairs start flying, I'm out of here." I said, "Ron, I'm right behind you. I could stick around for a riot. Who would?" So finally, I could tell, I forgot the most important part. Ed Parker was basically non-functional at that point at all. He had walked around the corner doing something, and he fell flat on his face. And then people rushed to him, and they got him up. And they called in the doctor, and the doctor said, "Take this man back to his hotel." He said, "Put me in a chair. I'm not missing my tournament."
Wow. Let me ask you.
Put him in a chair. He looked drunk.
Right.
He literally, people thought he was drunk. He was pale. He had lost all of his color. He was uneven and staggering. He was sitting down even. I went to him as soon as I heard it. I went to him and I said, "Look, we got to cut our demo." He says, No. People came to see it. Do the demo. You and Dave and Danny take what I was going to do, plus what you were going to do, and do the demo. So here we are. We were going to do what he was going to do. I had to divide that up. In the meantime, I had to get people that they were going to start the thing. In the meantime, I went back to the announcer, and he says, "Chuck, I'm just going now." He said, "This is getting really bad." I said, "Ron, hold it." I knew nobody's going to say go. So I said, "You know what? I may get in a lot of trouble for this," but I said to the band leader, "Get ready to play the national anthem." I said, "Ronnie, announce it." And by now, I mean, this place it's a buzz with angriness. And Ron gets on, he's got a beautiful, deep baritone voice. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for our national anthem."
How many people were there?
And the place was packed.
So that's a 10,000. You know, the Long Beach Sports Arena is at 10,000 seats.
It wasn't the arena. It was the
convention center?
No, Civic Center.
The Civic Center, okay.
Civic, it was smaller, but still, it was packed. I mean, sold out clear to the rafters. So he says, "Stand for the national anthem," and the crowd got quiet. And I pointed to the band leader and said, "Hit it." And they played it. "Oh, say you can't use it." And then the thing took on a life of its own.
Okay, well, we're on the subject of people being there. After they did the national anthem, was there some demos then, and then the competition?
Well, we had a whole program.
I see.
So it was my job to make sure that if you were up next, whether it was a match or a demo, that you were standing by right there. I was the one that had to go get Bruce. Say, "Bruce, come here."
Okay, so now you brought up Bruce Lee, which is obviously he was an unknown at the time, other than in the inner circle, correct?
Yep.
What kind of person? Just simply, where it's not about him, but tell us a little bit about him, because we have the public image. What was the man like privately?
Well, of course, I never got to know him really, really well because I stayed with Ed Parker. Danny Anasato fell in love with Bruce, and the rest is history. He went off with Bruce almost immediately. But Danny was a seeker. He was always looking at other schools. This was back in the day, Paul, when if you went to another school and your instructor found out about it, you get ostracized from your school. There was no switching around. There was no just seeking, going to see what they're doing even. He didn't do that. Danny did, and he let it not be known. And he could get away with it.
What was kind of relationship between Bruce and Mr. Parker?
Well, all right. If you want, go on our website, and there's I do a whole little thing about the night I met Bruce Lee. I'll do a condensed version if I can. Bruce was hanging around with Ed because of Ed's connections in the movie industry. And he had come down on a recommendation of some people in San Francisco. So you want to get into movies? Go to Ed Parker. He'll help you. And he did. And he was introducing him, and Bruce was doing little demonstrations and so on and so forth. And trying to get him into something, anything. Well, the one night he brought him to the studio, and he had the class. Ed had the class. And Bruce was just in the crowd standing out. We had a divider with a kind of a window that you could watch the class.
Was this in Pasadena?
Pasadena, next door to the school that's there now.
Okay. So this is the old school.
Yeah, the old school. And the class ended, and I remember Dave, Danny, myself, and I think there might have been another guy. We were walking out from the back room with our shoes in our hands and our jackets and so on, going to sit down, put our shoes on, and leave. Our gis and so on wrapped up. You remember how you wrap them from over your shoulder with your belt. Well, Ed comes out with this young guy. He was 21 years old at the time. I was 30. And he says, I want you guys to meet somebody. This is Bruce Lee, and he's a hot young martial artist. And then Ed got called to the phone or something, so he took off. So Bruce, boom, took over the conversation just like that. I mean, he started telling us about just coming back from Hong Kong. Well, as soon as we heard Hong Kong, wow, the Mecca of Kung Fu. So what's it like in Hong Kong? And he says, we asked him, what are the martial arts like in Hong Kong? His answer was, well, it's 95% commercial bullshit. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a high percentage. And I said, well, what about the rest? And he says, well, the rest of them, he says, half are trying, but they don't know what they're doing. Now I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, we're down to 2.5%. And when somebody said, well, what about those guys? He says, those guys are the real deal. He says, but you round eyes couldn't get down the alley where they work out because this is not a school. These guys are a private little thing. Triad, song, whatever, right? Okay. But these were the real deal. He could get down the alley. He'd seen these guys. So then he was talking about some of the physical things. I felt his forearm, and it was like trying to dig my nail into a piece of steel. It was impossible. And we're just talking about things in general. And the kid was very impressive. And then he pulled a thing on us that I'll never forget. Because he says, by the way, I was watching you earlier, and you were doing this. And he did something that we were doing. I don't remember what it was. And people have said, oh, he's lying about that. I would remember. Well, good for you, because I don't. Because it wasn't something that would, well, all right, let me finish first. He says, you were doing this. And he showed us. And it looked like he had been in the class forever. He did it beautifully. I mean, beautifully, just from standing there watching us, right? Okay. So we said, well, what about it? He said, why were you doing that? Why were we doing that? What do you mean, why were we doing that? Because Ed Parker was teaching it. And we all looked at each other like, what's the matter with this guy? And then he said, I was just wondering because it was wrong.
It was
I
wrong.
looked at Dave Nibbler, and I saw Dave get about 3 inches taller. He looked at me like, you want him or should I take him? And I'm like, let's see what he has to say first. So he tells us what it was about it that was wrong. Guess what? He was right. Now, did that make me lose faith in the system? No, absolutely not. So if any of us, any of these guys watching right now, any of you gentlemen right now, could walk into any school in the world and watch for an hour and a half and come up with a couple of things you look at and say, that's because they're teaching everything. It's not just, they're not just teaching the best stuff that night. I mean, you look at something, and I'll give you an example, folks. The short hour block. It's not only wrong, it's dangerous. It's ridiculous. It has no strength. You're blocked with the radial part, the radial nerve in your arm. Somebody's going to knock that aside and knock your head off. You can take a 250-pound man and a 125-pound boy can take and pull his arm down. There is no strength in that. Try it with your son. He'll pull your arm down. And we're learning that as a block. Give me a break. That's not a block. It's ridiculous. Now, I know Ed, see, here's the problem. Ed Parker could do that and make it work. But what has that got to do with you being the rest of us? We're not Ed Parker. He could do things that the rest of us couldn't do. He'd make it work. I don't know how he'd make it work, but he'd make it work. But that doesn't mean anything to the rest of us. I took that out of the system a long time ago.
So you like the extended outward?
Absolutely. All you got to do is this to this.
Right.
That's all you got to do. That's all it means. So to teach this at all is ridiculous. You just go right to that.
So we're at the internationals. When did Bruce do this this seminar or demonstration? He did several things, didn't he?
During the during the evening,
okay,
he got up there and did his thing. And I remember one of the things he did. Had a guy hold a plate in front of him, and he did his famous 2-inch punch. Bruce, well, first of all Bruce did was train. I mean, this is before he started juicing. Now we all know he was juicing later on. I mean, he built up like gangbusters. I mean, he did things that were totally abnormal because he was doing abnormal things. But even when he wasn't juicing, I mean, that's all he did. His wife worked. She supported both of them. And all he did was train. I remember one time, Danny Adesado told me, he says, Bruce laid out a program for me, a regimen for training. He says, Chuck, you can't do that and work a job at the same time. He says, because that would take your entire day. Well, that's all he did. So, I mean, this kid was dedicated to become a movie star. That's what he wanted. In fact, who was the guy that played our man Flint? Active. Anyway, neither here nor there. He said Bruce did not want to be a movie
James
star.
Colburn.
James Colburn, thank you. James Colburn said Bruce does not want to be a movie actor. He wants to be an emperor.
While we got on the subject here, Cecil just jumped in. Cecil, were you at the internationals back then?
Yes.
You were at the 64?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us what you thought? Give us your perspective.
I wasn't there in 64 then, but I was there the second time Bruce Lee came and did a demonstration.
What, 67 then I think it was.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us what
the
you
64
thought.
one got him a lot of attention by people that were there like Blake Edwards and other people in the industry, and it really kind of kick-started his career.
Well, that's how he got the audition for the Green Hornet.
Right. Right.
I think, I'm not sure if that was just one season, but they were shooting 26 episodes, which would be equivalent of maybe almost 3 years in today's television. But actually, Van Williams is the late Van Williams and Dean Jeffries were both good friends of mine. I knew them through George Barris, and Dean was a creator of the Black Beauty, and obviously Van was he actually was from Hawaii. And he got the opportunity to play the Green Hornet. He told me a little bit about working with Bruce and how efficient he was. But Cecil, tell us what you saw.
Well, I saw Bruce Lee do a demonstration, and he was faster than lightning, and very arrogant. You could tell he was very arrogant, but what I saw in him was he watched Steve Sanders fight. And he asked Mr. Parker, who is that guy? I want to fight with him. And Mr. Parker said, that's Steve Sanders. And he said, I'd like to spar with him because he's really good. And Mr. Parker said, well, that's one of my black belts. So they had Steve Muhammad, or Steve Sanders at the time, and Bruce Lee meet at Mr. Parker's school, and they sparred. And But this is what it was a deal. No one could have to sign like things where you couldn't tell what happened. And Danny and Dan Rodarte was there. And I tried to get Dan Rodarte to tell me, I mean, this is in the 60s to now, tell Dan Rodarte to tell me what happened. And he still won't tell me.
Well, I got you something for you, sir. Next weekend he'll be here, so we'll ask that question.
He won't tell you.
Oh yeah, oh he will. I'll mute him out. We won't spend time with him then.
Dan Rodarte said, you know, in the movies, Bruce Lee does the really nice kicks and stuff like that. But in the sparring session, they said Mr. Sanders had better kicks because, you know, his hands were so fast in point karate. He had better kicks, and Bruce Lee had better punching. And he said they went at it, but they won't tell anything else. And I've tried to get other people to tell me. I even tried to get my instructor, and he said he talked to Mr. Parker about it, but he wouldn't tell me what happened. So I finally left it alone.
But don't worry. In this format, we ain't gonna leave it alone, okay? And I'm gonna ask Robert to go make sure that he talks to him. Robert, you got it? The nicest guy in the world. Robert Temple. I love Robert. I call him Smiley. He is the nicest guy. He is going to, we're gonna seek him out. You're gonna find out for us. Hold on, you're off. Let me get you back there. Go ahead, Robert. Say something.
He has his mic off. Okay, there it is.
Can you hear him?
No.
I can't hear him. We can't hear you, sir. Your mic is off. Maybe it's on your end. We'll come back to him. Anyway, we got don't worry, Robert, we got you next weekend. That is your assignment, because Cecil is going to grill Dan Rodarte. You can guarantee. We are not going to let this get away. He can escape.
Okay.
He can run, but he can't hide from us. So anyway, going back. So enough of that, you know. So you're at the 64. What happened between 64 and 65?
What happened between 64 and 65 was that Ed Parker stayed home just about 3 or 4 weekends in the whole year. And on his own money, on his own dime, he was traveling around the country and Canada, going to any kind of a tournament that would, you know, they'd always invite him to be like chief referee and stuff like that, head referee. And he was going and researching how they were doing their tournaments, so that next year he could run a tournament that was, well, he could run it a lot better than he did the first year. The first year, besides passing out and all like that, we got finished around midnight. We can't hear you, Robert. No.
So you can, yes, sir.
All right, now we can hear you.
Yes, sir. I took my headset off. I had Muhammad on the line.
Oh, all right.
After I heard that information.
Inquiring minds want to know what happened.
Still won't tell me. They're asking, Bob. You still won't tell? He said he's not supposed to tell.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, they won't tell.
So
Yeah, we won't tell anybody, Robert.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna get off the line with you, Pop. I'll call you right after I finish with Mr. Sullivan. Yes, sir. Okay. He said one love, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Peoples, Paul, one love. He loves you guys.
Well, we love him too.
I'll call you back.
God bless you, sir. We love you too. We just want to make
I tell you, Steve Sanders Muhammad is the only man that I know that can punch as hard going backwards as he can coming forward. The man was amazing, absolutely amazing.
That's another Muhammad Ali.
Yeah. You know, it's just how many people could do that? Be backing up and punching just as hard. Man, oh man, oh man. He could get you no matter where you were or who you were. Every day of the night tonight. Ever tell you the night that I clocked him so hard I knocked his tooth through his face?
What was that?
I got Steve Sanders so hard with a fist that it put his bottom tooth right through here and it cut my knuckle.
Oh my God!
I had to catch him because he went limp in the knees. He loosened the knees, and I had to catch him. I had to grab him, and his eyes were rolling around like gumballs, like a slot machine, until they finally came out tilt. And anyhow, what had happened was, Steve, there's an expression I love. He could get gone before Quick could get ready.
Yes, sir.
This guy was so fast. I mean, it's almost like he knew when you were going to move before you knew when you were going to move. And I said to myself one night, because I could never catch him, I could just never put any kind of a sustained rush on him to where I could catch him. So I said to myself, tonight's the night. I'm going to catch him. I don't care if he circles and runs out the door, because I'm going to catch him. Well, if he ever turned his back on me and took off, I knew I was dead. But anyhow, what happened was I came leaping in, and not knowing it, I trapped his foot with mine. I stepped on his foot. Well, I expected him to be at least 3 yards beyond where he was. So when I came through with the punch, I came through it for 3 yards beyond him. So I hit him so hard because he was still there. And that's the last place I expected him to be. I did not expect him to be there at all. And when I got him, I mean, I literally had to catch him to keep him from going down, just going into a pile. And didn't get his nose, just got him in the mouth. And like I said, the lower front tooth. And he said to me, my tooth is loose. I said, don't let it come out. Don't let it come out. Keep it in no matter what. And he went to the dentist the next day. And the dentist said, best advice you could have got is because if it come out, it ain't going back in. But he says it will reseat itself if you keep it in there. The gum will go ahead and get it back. All right, now there's a follow-up to that story. 2 weeks later, we're freestyling, because we freestyle every week anyway. So 2 weeks later, we're freestyling, and I got him turned. I actually had a hold of his arm, his gi, and I got him turned, and I'm going to make a point with his kidneys. And all of a sudden, here comes a foot. There wasn't that much space between us. How his foot got between him and me, I do not know. But a foot came up and caught me under the chin. And if I'd have had my tongue out, it'd been laying on the mats. Because I mean to tell you, I felt just a wham up, and I was like in La La Land. And he said it wasn't payback, but I don't know. No, it wasn't. It really wasn't. I know it wasn't. But it was just kind of funny that 2 weeks almost to the minute that I got him, 2 weeks later he got me.
Let me ask you.
And his control was so good.
When you were preparing for the internationals, obviously after the first year, everybody has that first year experience. I remember the first tournament, the first major event I did in Palm Springs, and then the first major event in Las Vegas. And it's a learning experience. But it was very exciting because people look forward to these events as they grow and whatnot. What was it like? What was the atmosphere? What was the excitement getting ready for the internationals? Because I remember in Pasadena, Lord, I mean, Steve agreed with probably on me on this, that, somewhere about 7-8 weeks before we started thinking about, okay, are we going to compete? And with the internationals, did they decide they were going to do forms first? Was the how did that work out? But anyway, just the atmosphere of people coming together.
Everybody's hyped. I mean, everybody was, up for it, ready to go. The bad part was just standing around and waiting and not knowing what was going on, and because nobody knew what was going on. The second international was just as bad as the first international because it was even bigger yet. There was more people yet. After that year, I asked Ed Parker, how did you do? And he says, I broke even. So here he was 2 years into this thing, and he was still $1,800 in the hole. And it was the third year. I asked him again, how did you do? He said, I made my $1,800 back. So now he's 3 years into this thing, and he's just even. But he knew that in time, this thing was going to be big. It was going to work itself out, and it all did. And it got to the point where, oh hell, I don't know how much money he was making off it, but he made a lot of money off that.
The philosophy of the internationals is to bring the martial arts community together. In those early years, who was there from the other systems and styles of the martial arts that you can remember?
Everybody.
Well,
Bill
everybody,
Rosaki,
but I mean, can you give us some names and maybe?
well, Bill Rosaki was there. Norris was there, of course. Mike Stone. I mean, he won it the first 2 years.
Joe Lewis.
Joe came along later. Really,
No.
Joe was a late comer to the international. He wasn't there during the early years.
That whole group from Texas was there when I was
the
there.
Texas guys were there. Pat
Burleson.
Pat Burleson. Right. Yeah. And the whole Texas. I remember the Texas guy walking up to me at the first international saying, "What can we do to help?" I said, "Go in the balcony and stop the fights." He said, "Okay, you got it."
Let me interrupt for a second, both of you guys. We're having Mr. Totten, Dr. Totten's having a shirt sale behind him right now. Carl, jump in here, sir. Give us some input.
This is my shirt from Kenya.
Okay, well, tell us give us some input what your experience at the internationals. And
I knew about the first internationals I was in 4, right?
Yep.
And I was studying Kaju Kenpo with John Leone at the time. And occasionally I would actually get your school, Chuck, was on Crenshaw, right?
Yep.
And I would sometimes take the Crenshaw bus down south to where your school was. What was it, around 73rd, Florence, something like that?
Around there, yeah. I think it was the 7300 block.
Yeah, I'd go down there and watch your class sometimes because I used to go watch everybody, Nishiyama, Oshima, and you. That was about the best in town were you three, so I'd love to go watch you guys' class all the time.
Should have jumped in.
Yeah, well, like you said, at the time, though, you had to kind of stay with who you were at.
Yes. No, you did.
And so I was with John Leone taking Kaju, and I wasn't sure I could get away with studying with you. I
Right.
wanted to, but I think
Right.
Leone may have killed me if I did.
Yep.
So I knew about the internationals, but I don't think I wound up going actually until 68, because Bruce Lee was there, but he didn't demonstrate. Mr. Parker brought him up on stage, introduced him, I think in 68, and then he sat right at ringside, and I was up in the stands because, as you said, the internationals were so crowded in those days.
Oh.
So, I was upstairs, I had my binoculars, and I was looking at Bruce Lee's face the whole time. And like you said, I could tell that he was arrogant because, guys would walk by Bruce and they would just bow out of humility or, out of respect.
Right.
And one guy went up to him and bowed, and Bruce Lee just went, nah. Like that.
While we're on the subject of people at the internationals, I know that Wes is here on behalf of his family. Wes, I've unmuted you, so why don't you give us a little bit of insight of your family being at the internationals? I know that Mr. Parker had Gil do a knife demonstration there, and after that, they never allowed that knife demonstration ever happened again because it scared the living bejesus out of a few people when he used his knives. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it, though?
I'm not sure too much about that. I know that they were there. I know my mother also competed in one of the internationals, but my dad did his black belt thesis with the knife form. So, and then Mr. Parker, I guess, said you should have done it with this and took the sheath and then considered to beat somebody with the sheath quite a bit. So instead of the knife, so, do more damage with the sheath. But like I said, when 64 was when I was born. So those early years, I wasn't even around.
Robert, you got any insight on that? When you first were at the internationals?
Insight, he just said he wasn't born. Where was I? I'm still I wasn't even thought of.
I did see your dad do that demonstration, for his black belt thesis, and it was spectacular. I can tell you that. At the end, when he took that knife, whop, and threw it right into that board, the entire audience went, "Whoa!" No one had ever seen anything like that, ever. It was amazing.
It's funny because Derek told me that story last night, Wes, so I thought you might have known it. And he said to me, yeah, Dad did this, and when he did for his thesis, it scared all the judges out of their keys. They're like, no, we can't have this anymore. That was too real for us. It wasn't a movie. It was, that thing was coming, boom, boom, boom. And obviously, Gil Hibben is just a legend when it comes to not only making knives, the use of knives. But you know what? One of the greatest things about him, and I hope he gets a chance to watch this, he's one of the most genuine human beings I've ever met. I love him dearly. I know most people do. And he will be one of our special guests real soon. And I know that Wes, you and your brother Derek and your mom and Linda will be there to assist on that. So love to hear from him because he is so relevant to the martial arts world.
Here's the knife. I keep it on my desk.
Look at you. Look at you. Hey, guess what though? I have Rambo. And that so, anyway, so let's move on. So we're into the 65, 66, 67. How many of the internationals did you go to, Mr. Sullivan?
I went for the first 6 internationals. I wrote and directed Ed's demos.
Really?
Yeah, I would wrote the demos, and I would tell him what he was to do, and I give him a script, so to speak. And I mean, it was all stuff that he was doing anyway. All you had to do is, and then as far as like the mass attack, we'd always usually wind up, with a mass attack, and everybody would say, "I'll be first. I'll be first."
Why? Because the guy at the end was bloody.
Oh, let me tell you one cute story about it. We had a student by the name of Big John Walker, and Big John was a big man. He's bigger than Ed Parker, and he was in the mass attack at the internationals on the riser, and he got aced out of his spot. He was supposed to come in 3rd or 4th like that. And it was like 5 guys or 6. And all of a sudden, everybody's down except Big John and Ed. And Ed gets in a stance and looks at him. And Big John went, and he laid down. And the audience loved it.
He
just laid down on the floor. That's it. I'm out.
That's funny you say that because I grew up in the late 70s. And so I'm going to turn this question over to my friend Steve Orsino, who's watching. Steve, so I'm going to unmute you. Would you please give us some of your questions that you wanted to ask Mr. Sullivan?
You kind of asked most of them, actually.
I know, but you wanted to talk a little bit about the tournaments and what was happening leading up to the tournaments and a few other questions.
Oh, okay. Well, so one of the questions I had was, I remember in the say from '69 to early '70s, there were a series of tournaments that kind of led up. California State Championship, of course, but there's also like the Downey Open and the Inglewood Open, etc. I didn't know who the promoters were for those, or was that all Mr. Parker?
I only got about half of your question, but basically, I think all right, Ralph Castro was running the state championships in San Francisco, and I think probably these people were all independents, and then they were sending their champions forth into the fray, so to speak. So I don't think that Ed Parker had much to do with those particular things. He would support them. He'd be there. Like I said, for that first year after the first internationals, Ed Parker spent almost every weekend away from his family.
Now the ones I remember is like the Four Seasons, which I know was separate. It was Mike Stone's, but also the Inglewood Open was definitely IKK sanctions and Downey Open, etc.
Right. Yeah. Well, he would sanction them, but I don't know if he actually had much to do with them, the actual running of them. I think they were independent tournaments. He was busy enough just keeping up with the international and making sure that it went off each year. For the first 10 years, I mean, it was still a job. It was always a job. The first 3 were insane, and then they got a little more sane after that. But for a good decade, I mean, that thing was so huge. I mean, it took a cadre of people to just to make sure it got through the day.
It's so funny you say that because I used to go to the concerts there at the Long Beach. When I was going to the internationals, it was inside the Long Beach Sports Arena.
Right.
And I would go there to see rock groups. I saw Boston and Journey and all kinds of people that played there as a young man. And so when I got the first chance to go in there, I got to go in there for the tournament. It was like surreal, and you could see anybody. And literally, I remember, watching and meeting Chuck Norris. I went, wow, Chuck. It was interesting. You saw a lot of people that you didn't think you would see. And it was really cool. And the best part about it is that when you did get a chance later on, Steve can agree probably with me, when we became black belts under Ed Parker and Frank Trejo, we would come down beforehand and go to the Vagabond. Remember the Vagabond? The Vagabond. Anybody that knows what I'm talking about. And there's, this little hole in the wall hotel or motel. I think it was more of a motel than anything else. And going in the back room to see him and spend quality time with Mr. Parker. And then going to the tournament and seeing him and working the tournament in a different way. And then meeting all the people that were there, like Tom Kelly and Reiner Schutze. And then you had the voice of the internationals, and you'd have Jim Grumwell photographing, and then get to see all the others that were there. See, we're down the line. So we're like third and fourth generation black belts that came about. But it was always great. You get to see, all the greats are there, right? Am I right, Steve?
Oh yeah. I have some stories I can tell about Vagabond, and other stories I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, and then later on, and then when it was, was it the Hyatt? Isn't the Hyatt part of the Long Beach Sports Arena now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, because I remember when that was like the host hotel, and I went to see in the early '90s because I was I was traveling a lot, and Mrs. Parker said, "Would you like to come and sing the national anthem?" I said, "Absolutely. That's a contribution. Anything I can do to help you." And I was hanging out with Frank and the guys. That was always interesting with Mr. Trejo. So anyway, so I don't want to, so what was the best experience for you now, looking back? And I'm going to leave this sort of an open question for anybody that's here, from Carl and Robert and the rest of the guys out there. See, so what was the thing that you took away from the internationals?
The first time I went to the international, I had heard about Chuck Norris, but I'd never seen him. And I'd never seen him fight. And at that time, whoever won the international the year before didn't have to fight through the eliminations. They just fought in the finals. And Chuck Norris had won the year before I got there. But he refused to just go to the finals. He wanted to start right from the beginning, which he did. And he won all the way up until he fought for the finals that night. He fought Joe Louis that night and cleaned Joe Louis out that night.
Really?
Oh my God, what a fantastic fighter he was. He beat Arnold that night. He beat Steve Sanders that night. He beat Joe Louis that night. Just to watch Chuck Norris fight, you would look at him, you would think, God, man, this guy, he can't fight. But boy, he sure could, and he thought he could fight too. He think it was not right. That something had happened in the universe if he lost. It was. I read his book, and for him to lose, something had happened. Something had went wrong in the universe for him to lose.
Yeah, he met Chuck Sullivan in a previous life. Right, Mr. Sullivan? Do we talk about that, Mr. Sullivan?
No, we don't need to talk about that. let the legend live.
Well, we're getting down to the end of our session here. We got only a few more minutes.
And the Nationals was a great family reunion. Every year I've seen guys that I haven't seen in so long. So it was a wonderful experience. It was fantastic.
I don't think people went to the international for the international. It was the social thing to go.
Yeah.
It was like having a reunion.
Absolutely.
Everybody was there just to see each other.
Mm-hmm. It was
You know,
beautiful.
it was great. You got to hang out with Benny Urquidez and Steve Sanders and Chuck Norris and Joe Louis.
How many of you saw the Benny John Natividad fight?
I was there that night.
Were you?
I was there.
Yeah, I was too.
One of
That
the
was the
one of the
fight
best fights I've ever seen.
That
Yep,
was the
best fight.
That was
Yes.
the best point fight I ever seen.
Yep, absolutely.
Bar none.
Bar none. Couple of really, really great individuals.
Oh my God.
Let me bring this because we're running out a few minutes left. First of all and foremost, I want to thank you, Mr. Sullivan. You are truly a valuable person, a human being that really cares about Kempo, cares about the Ed Parker legacy. We are so grateful that you take time out of your schedule and to answer these questions. And it's really nice that you bother taking my phone calls because I call him more than anybody else in the world. Poor Chuck. Laney is probably going, oh my God, it's Paul Casey.
I don't need an alarm clock. I have Paul.
Yeah, exactly. So I will call him. Sorry about that, Robert. I think I'm outdoing you. But it is really an honor to have you as one of our special guests. And you've offered and given so much. We could spend a lot more time with you. So I just want to thank you. And, you know, I want really encourage people to go to, you know, to Mr. Sullivan's website. He gives so much more. And he's just a real human being. And we thank you. And I'm looking forward
thanks
to
for having me, Paul.
It's our honor and pleasure. And you know, the whole purpose of the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame is to celebrate greatness, to recognize people that dedicate their lives. And we are so honored by the people that I'm looking here on this. And, you know, Cecil, you are one of the most genuine human beings, and you are such a good man. Your stories are wonderful. For those that have not been there, you have to come to the Hall of Fame dinner and meet and spend quality time with this guy. It is it's really quite good. He was so sincere in representing Grandmaster Bill Ruosaki. I mean, what can I say? I mean,
hey, my grandmother would love to hear that.
And well, don't worry. In a few weeks, you're going to be the guy up on that we're going to be doing all the questions. So we're going to grill you. And I think Mr. Sanders, through the help of Robert Temple, is going to be asking you a lot of questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be ready for you.
That, you know, it's the nice thing about it. We have over 77 people that are part of the Hall of Fame. And the beautiful thing about it is that we have a chance to spend some quality time with each of these people. Some of them have passed on. And the purpose of the Hall of Fame is not to recognize somebody after the fact. It's about recognizing them now. So with that, no further ado, if there's any question you want to finish up, Mr. Sullivan, what can I say? That's my son. Sorry, guys.
There it goes.
He's 5 years old and he knows what a camera's about. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. It's down to a few seconds. And thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time. Mr. Totten, we're going to be talking. You and I are going to be talking about the books. I have the books. Where are they? The books are here. I've got all of them. You know, we're talking about I have Matosi's book. And I think tomorrow we'll be discussing some of that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, great. I should be available.
You're unmuted, or you muted yourself? Let's see. There we go. I think you're unmuted, so you should be able to say something.
There. Yeah, there.
Are you there?
Finally.
Carl?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, tomorrow is Dennis Knatzer. Thank you very much, folks. You have a great weekend. Tomorrow's Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all you mothers.
Yeah.
God bless you. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Bye.